That was
well, I'm made to do the introduction,
purchase.
right? You guys cool with that?
Yep.
You guys ready?
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Zoop. Welcome back to Gush. Today we have a real podcast on, unlike us. They're the complete opposite of our show, where they're professional, they're consistent, they have guests that people want to listen to, they're entertaining, they don't stutter, they don't do drugs on the show. Welcome, the Create Unknown, or as I like to call it, the Make Something Mean Something experience. It is co-hosted by Matt Tabor, a narrator who I don't think I've seen anyone even come close to in the podcasting world or in the YouTubing world. So I'm very happy to have Matt Tabor joining us. And Kevin Lieber of VSauce 2. Now, you might have heard of Michael from VSauce, but Kevin is kind of like I feel like Kevin is more substance over style. Maybe that's just my take, but Kevin is kind of more of the hard science guy. So we're happy to have him on.
You're a hard
as well.
science guy, Kevin.
Those are two separate descriptions.
That's one hard science guy.
Well, I'm
Two separate adjectives.
definitely hard being on this podcast with you guys. Thanks for having me.
And that's all that matters.
That was like 2 out of 3 of the words.
And Sam, why don't you say something?
These guys are like low key, like some of the coolest people in the YouTube community. I feel like before I started connecting with other YouTubers, I didn't really, and as someone who doesn't really watch educational content that much, I like didn't know about Matt and Kevin until I got into like meeting other YouTubers. And when I did meet them, my reaction was like, damn, these guys are actually like super fucking cool and based as fuck. And like, there's a lot of let's just say not that in the YouTube community. So it was extremely refreshing and nice, and I was like really happy to connect with them. And now I'm stoked that you guys are on the show.
Well, I didn't want to jump in after the description because I was offended that you called us professional. Do you know how hard we work to squeeze in terrible things? Like if we have a recording where we don't somehow talk about like consuming like pea-soaked sandwiches, it's a failure.
Hey, your commentary. No. I don't mean to say. I mean like your guys' production quality is professional. You guys, we were on your show, and I think me and Sam both had a great time. Like, honestly, just bullshitting. Like we were just talking about whatever, like music and just like random memes. Like we talked about furries at one point.
Yeah.
So you guys have your conversations are all over the place, which I really like. It's like always something interesting being talked about.
Yeah, we have had that comment in the past where people they go into the Create Unknown sometimes nervous because I don't know if they think we're going to be confrontational, which we never are. But I think maybe it's that like element of just not knowing where the conversation's going to go, because it can go, I like to think of it as highly analytical and hopelessly stupid. It can go deep into very serious issues, especially in the creator community, and then it could go equally deep into shallow things, paradoxically, such as like how you can gamify a piss jug.
Yeah, there's definitely an anxiety with some people, though. And I don't fully know why, because again, it's not like we're famous for confrontation or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't think a whole lot of people that any of us know are too used to sitting down with like an unscripted but serious conversation. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to say something dumb, and I get that. Like, I don't want to say something dumb either, or at least I didn't at the beginning. Eventually I realized, like, trying to prevent that is hopeless, and you're just going to say something stupid eventually. But I think unless you record a lot and have a lot of those conversations, you're a little bit tight at the beginning. I think that's pretty normal.
Would you say there is a? Would you say there is a?
Oh. This is how you're professional, we're not.
Yeah. No, because, well, this actually ties into with what I want to say, which is that's funny that you say all that, because when dumb shit like that happens on this show, or like I say something dumb, or even Sam says something dumb, we kind of just roll with it, and we think it's like, because we think it's funny. Like, we actually just have a good time in our own conversations doing that. But the question I want to ask, though, is, do you guys, your mindset with it, let's say, when you're having these conversations, it's obviously a little bit guided with your approach. Like, Tabor, you're always asking, these very, like, really good interview questions to keep the conversation going. Like, it's not just like random shit like, what's it like being a big YouTuber? It's like specific questions that you clearly did research to find out, what to ask. You weren't just you're not like just asking the same questions over and over. And that's almost like journalistic to me. It's almost like, it feels like 60 Minutes or something in a way. Is that what you're going for? Is that like, what was your vision for it, is what I want to know.
I just want Andy Rooney's eyebrows. Like 20, 30 years from now, I just want these massive caterpillars on my forehead. No, I mean, we do a blend, don't we, Kevin, where, like, I'd say we plan to a really light degree, mostly so we don't forget anything important. So, like, we don't script a whole lot, but we do have a list of things we want to touch on to make sure that we get to them eventually. And sometimes we make a call in the, as we're doing it, where we decide not to pursue something because something else is more interesting or whatever. But I think this is tough because it's such a bad answer for somebody who's like, I want to be able to, organize and plan things well. I think it's a function of both of us having known a tremendous range of people over the years and having had thousands of completely different conversations. So when we start to talk to somebody, we can get a sense of what they're into, what they're comfortable talking about, kind of sometimes even where they're going next before they've explicitly said it. And that allows us to be like a mix of loose and tight, where we can let somebody talk about anything and it goes where it goes, but at the same time make sure we hit the important parts and always bring it back to the focus of the show.
Yeah, you have a good way of not straying too far from a central theme, which makes it an enjoyable listening experience all the way through.
Yeah, I think one trick that might be helpful is to circle back on things. Like if somebody says something that you had a question about, I will often write that down, and no matter where they go with the rest of their answer, and maybe it's 2 or 3 minutes later, I will make sure to say, hey, you said this earlier and I want to ask about that. I think that's really important because that ends up being sometimes the better question. Like not asking a follow-up question to where they ended their thought, but going kind of backwards a few minutes when they dropped something that they didn't really think through. And you say, hey, let's think that through. Why did you say that?
And they're like, oh shit, I was talking out my ass.
Yeah.
And that's what a good podcast is.
I want to open up an idea there, which is the way I interpret that on the surface, I guess, but I think there's reason behind this. We often say things when we're not planning our words so carefully in the moment of a conversation. I think we often let things slip that we didn't even know about ourselves.
Right.
That we don't even fully plan to say, but it just, that's like kind of what therapy invokes out of people, I suppose. But there's like little mini spurts of therapy, if you want to think of it that way, going on all the time in a conversation that you're invested in. We're cutting that. Obviously, like there's exceptions to that, right? Like sometimes you're just in a really casual conversation and that's not necessarily going to happen. But I think in certain, and this kind of relates to Sam, like what your whole sort of investigation, onto Dr. K. Well, really the discussion you had with Destiny more recently, I think even more so than your video, where you guys are talking about like, where is this barrier of online therapy? And like, what does this even really mean? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty with that, because I think what we're discovering is that therapy is not just one thing. It's like
it's specifically going on the Create Unknown. I think that's what Destiny and I sort of came to a conclusion of.
Yeah, exactly. But no, but like I do think that there is just to bring it back to what I was saying though, I do think that there is a certain like level of authenticity or genuineness that comes across when people are just comfortable enough to just sort of speak their mind.
Yeah, something will accidentally slip out of the subconscious, but the your job is to pick it up, like catch what slipped out of their subconscious that they haven't thought through, but it fell out. Oops. Yeah, so you grab that and say, "Hey, let's talk about that thing that just kind of fell out because that's interesting."
Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of kicking it in a ditch too. Like you see something that. Oh, okay. So first of all, it's incredibly tough to know what the tone, the mood, how you're coming off, any of that is when you're the one speaking, when you're in the moment. And going back to the prior topic that we had about like planning and all that stuff, it's a tremendous asset to have another person. So, for me, that's Kevin, who can talk for a couple minutes and I get to listen and kind of creep on who's saying what and think about it. And maybe I come back to a thing and maybe I take it into a different direction when I do chime back in. But having that distance is really good. If it's just one-on-one, that is a different dynamic. And when you're answering the questions, it's really tough to know, if you're saying something interesting, funny, boring, whatever. You can really easily say something that makes you look away that you kind of don't want to look. And it's really the other person's responsibility to get the person away from that. And I'm stumbling on this because I so want to throw a couple people under the bus and just be like, hey, when this guy, clearly showed that, he was a jerk in this situation. But I can't be specific. But no, that definitely happens where somebody says something and you're like, okay, if we keep talking about this and keep pulling that thread, it's not going to look good for him. So now's a good time for a topic change. Now's a time to go down like a different twig on the branch where it's definitely going to be a better look for them.
It's almost, would you say you're trying to, well, let me back up actually a second because I want to zoom out even further for a second here. Being good at a podcast like that, or just content like that in general, it's a strange new territory because socializing in real life is one thing, like that's one set of skills. But having like the social skills for an online environment where we're like, Sam and I, like we talk about this, we kind of call it like Plato's cave, where it's like there's shadows on the wall that we're dealing. It's a representation of a person that I'm talking to rather than an actual person face to face. But that brings, I think, a new set of like social norms and cues, and maybe they're not even social. They're more technical in some cases too, which is interesting. As in like, you're not necessarily reading the other person's face, but you wait for a lull in their speech or something. So it's just audio based rather than in person. Like we were just talking about whether or not we should turn on these cameras for this podcast. But then Kevin suggested that we do because it's actually, you can tell easier when someone is about to stop talking or start talking or whatever, because you get a visual cue, obviously. So it's like these kinds of things are you have to kind of unlearn and relearn a lot of things from real life. But I wanted to ask you though, do you guys plan to ever have a real life show? Are you fine with staying online? How do you feel about that?
What do you mean by real life show? Like what does that look like?
On a stage?
On a stage?
Like, no. I mean, like, you guys are both in the same studio.
Oh,
So you're talking.
like
in
the
same
H3
room.
podcast or something like that?
Yeah,
Like
or
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, yeah, like just where you're meeting, you're in person when you're doing the podcast. You do it in person with people, not over Discord or anything.
It's unlikely just due to the geographic issues with that. I know, like, for instance, a few months back, Cold Ones went to Los Angeles. I mean, they're from Australia. Max and Chad. They went to LA for, I don't know, a month or two, and then recorded a bunch of episodes there. I don't even remember when that was. Maybe that was a couple of years ago now. But everybody's all over the place, man. Like, Joe Rogan, people will fly in to Austin or wherever he is now to do that because it's gigantic. We don't have a travel budget, so I mean, Matt and I can be in the same location. We used to do that, but we don't anymore just because
we were recording in the same room.
Yeah, it's a bit of there's an opportunity cost there for the travel just for us. That, sitting in the car for 6 hours, it's like, well, I could just not do that and work for those 6 hours or relax for those 6 hours. So I don't see the benefit of it unless you're living in Los Angeles, I guess, but that's probably not happening.
Or if you're big, like super big.
It's not so much Los Angeles. I think you could just be living anywhere. Like you, but I guess you're saying to have guests, they would have
guests.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
They have to have someplace to go.
So famous.
It is interesting that Los Angeles is like, obviously not everyone is from there, but there's enough people there that you could sustain an internet-based audience with guests there in person.
Mark Maron has done that forever. I mean, the W2F pod, that's like one of the oldest podcasts that there is, and he has always just done that like out of his garage in LA and has comedians show up and they have a conversation. So that's one of the oldest forms of podcasting is what you're talking about, but I don't see that in our future.
Do you think
this
there's
reminds
a
me of
lost
something
benefit of it?
Oh, well, this is actually what my interjection is about. Is about how what would be the difference in the dynamic. And I think it would be a tiny little bit different, but not substantially. I mean, most of the things operate the same way. And what pops into my head with this like specific thought is when people used to discuss online poker as opposed to live poker, and it was like, how can you do this? You can't see the other people's faces. Well, it turned out not to matter a whole lot. There's a little bit of information you might get from that. There's also information you get from the online stuff that you don't get in person, and it's the same. It's substantially the same between the two. So in terms of production, maybe it's cooler to have, for the viewer to have people in an H3 style studio and everybody's, there together, and that's nice to watch. But if you're taking a transcript of the conversation, do I think it's going to be any different? I don't think so. And if it is, it's going to even out both ways so that it's not, one isn't better or worse.
Well, because the thing that you need to consider also is that whatever you would gain from being in person, you lose over the fact that everybody knows this is being recorded for public consumption. So you can't compare like an in-person private conversation with an in-person public conversation. Either way, you know that people are listening, so you're going to be inherently guarded with your language just for the fact that
that's true.
All of us don't want to lose our jobs over some snide remark we made in passing on a podcast.
That's true, but I don't Sorry, I'll let you interject in a second, Sam. I know you want to say something.
I actually didn't have anything, but I'm glad you feel like I did. I hope everyone feels like I have so much to say.
Okay, well, we can move on from this, but I just want to make one comment, which is that I hear what you're saying, Kevin. And I agree with you on that people are just, when they're aware that they're being recorded, they're going to naturally just change what they're going to say. But I think that is one layer of separation from reality, and I think the remoteness of talking through a screen is another layer of separation. Like, for example, it's just a little bit like when Tabor was talking, there's a slight delay on his webcam versus the audio, and it's like
trippy.
That's fine. Like, it's probably something on my end, or maybe it's his end, but it doesn't. I'm not like hung up on it, but that's just like a natural part of online conversations. You expect sometimes there to be not a perfect image. And I guess I don't know. I guess I place more significance on the difference that being in person with people makes.
Well, what's the difference between a book and a video? That's been a question between a book and audio, between something printed versus, centuries ago going to hear somebody say it. There's all this different. There's a difference in medium, but is it ultimately a big deal? I mean, if you read a book and then you watch the movie of it, there are probably times where you don't focus as much on dialogue or on noticing some things visually that you would have been forced to read about in a book. Well, you miss that out, or miss out on that, and it kind of works vice versa. You get to see something or hear something that impacts you in a much greater way than a paragraph about it would have done. So is it better or worse? I don't know. Probably depends on what you're going for.
That's a good way to look at it. It's just like, it's not that it's better or worse, it's that it's different, and there's unique positives and pros and cons to each one.
You have trade-offs. I think trade-offs is one of the concepts, like just generally speaking, that is incredibly undervalued and underthought about in human life and society. We always want to have, this would be better than that, or like, here's the solution to that. With everything, I don't care like what we're talking about, serious or frivolous. Trade-offs are never really considered, or it never seems to be articulated in such a manner, from my perspective at least, when I think that it's like the crucial element to almost everything that people argue about.
What's like a really notable argument you feel like where trade-offs people aren't considering trade-offs?
Any political argument ever. Pick one. Pick any of them. I'm serious. Pick anything that people have bumper stickers about, and that's a trade-offs argument.
Yeah.
Okay, global warming.
Sure. Trade-offs. Next. Go down the list. Just bullet point all of them.
The trade-off there is substantially altering your actions, usually at your own expense, to do things differently to affect, global warming. That's easier for some people than others. For a normal person, it might be, I can get a hybrid car instead of, an F-150. Maybe that's an easy trade-off for them. If you are running a factory, then you have massive costs associating with doing things in like a green or sustainable way. So the trade-offs are not the same for everybody on most issues, and you've got to acknowledge, number one, that they exist. Like Kevin says, you can't dismiss them at all, but people do it because it's so much easier. And then when you do acknowledge them, you have to acknowledge that they tend to be different. The impacts and the costs and whether it's hard or easy. No, there's a tremendous range of those trade-offs. So it's accepting them in the first place and then like finding the nuance in them.
This is actually somehow every time that I record a podcast before I'm about to release a major video, the conversation starts out as totally unrelated and then ends up relating like almost to what I'm exactly working on. Because this video I'm making about LA is like a documentary about LA basically, and a lot of its issues and stuff from the perspective of someone like just filming people's stories on the ground there. But anyways, there is a lot of that going on, trade-offs when it comes to things like, you know, the war on poverty or the war on drugs, or, you know, a lot of policies that are meant to help, a lot of things that are meant to help, but they always come with a trade-off. They might help something here, but they cause another problem there, or they, you know, it's just, and it becomes a very complicated, politics is complicated, basically, you know, is the short way of putting it. It's extremely complicated. And I think it's almost an inevitable, there's something to the numbers thing, I think, where it's like, it almost seems like an inevitability of numbers of people. When you have so many people, like in LA, when you have 10 million people, you know, running around with all these different businesses and all this competition, it becomes difficult for any one person to really have a good grasp on, I feel like.
This is the Soviet Union problem, where it's like, you know, if the four of us live together, we could eventually figure out a pretty efficient way to buy groceries. You know, we would eat different things and have different diets and just plain want different things. But eventually, we could get to a place that really satisfied all four of us. If we have 40 people in a house, we have to do it in a more general way. Like, we're still probably going to do a pretty good job after a while, but our individual, you know, kind of point score out of 100 is not going to be as high. So now you're talking 10 million, whether it's, you know, 1 million in, you know, some city in the former Soviet Union, or 10 million people in LA. How do you do that in a meaningful way? It is ridiculously difficult with any number of people, any size of an organization, to handle a complex thing with accuracy. You can contrast that with businesses, like do it with something like Apple. Apple honestly doesn't do that many things. You know, it makes a limited range of products and has some web services, but ultimately it's not like a government that's doing like literally thousands of things at different levels. So they can pull that off and do a pretty good job and be pretty responsive to the people who make up the group. How do you do that in Los Angeles? You kind of can't. It's too big.
Too varied, right?
Yeah. You would have to constantly, like, preferentially rank everything in your life for the city of Los Angeles or the county to know what to do to make you happy. So the only alternative really is to like cede control to those smaller units, whether that unit is the individual or, you know, a hamlet, a village, a town. I don't know, something manageable.
Yeah. Tabor, I have to thank you because you just helped me finish my conclusion.
Hey-o.
So
there we go.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
It's actually just going to be a clip from this.
It's just going to be this clip. Yeah. I'm gonna. Can I sample your voice? Can I sample your voice?
Can we redo it so we can include the word devolution? You know, just to throw a vocab word in. No, we really do see it on YouTube though. Like you can see it on Twitter when somebody, like right now, the big one is Copper Cab. Copper Cab is trying to get his channel unsuspended. Copper Cab's been around for like 10 years that I can remember.
He's a massive troll.
Yeah, you know, I remember him in his
He's
war
the guy
with
who
Gavin
said
McInnes.
gingers don't have souls or something. And he was like, this is like 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
He was like, what was he doing? He's like, gingers do have souls. I'm tired. He's like yelling at people. Wasn't that his first
His
video?
screaming was amazing. Yeah, that was so
great.
funny. But like, you know, they can't respond to his channel like on an individual way. So it's the canned response. It's the submit and appeal, which is a bullshit process. Even when it works, it takes a long time. They have this kind of one-size-fits-all system for a massive range of people with a massive range of content in like 200 different countries. So how are they going to be able to administer that effectively? They can't. And I understand why they can't. I don't think it could be done a whole lot better with that particular setup, But that's how it works. When you try to do too much with too large a group, you just can't get very far.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we're doing the smart thing by having 2 team groups here in this joint podcast.
Really just dividing it. You know, you guys are one person, we're one person. There's only 2 people to accommodate.
Yeah, I mean, you joke about that, guys, but have you ever been on a call with like 10 people?
Oh, that's impossible.
Yeah.
It is
You're in Plato's cave at that point.
the worst. It is absolutely the worst. Because first of all, at some point, each one of those 10 feel like they need to interject, or else what are they doing there? They need to justify their presence on the call in some manner.
Yeah.
But ultimately, maybe 3 people usually have some sort of meaningful contribution to make to that call. Okay, so great. Now you have more than twice as many who are just lurking and eventually... I mean, look, how about we bring this conversation to why Hollywood ruins so many media properties. And that's because there are a million cooks in that kitchen and a million people trying to justify their jobs. And before you know it, you have like $300 million disasters like, you know,
The Last Jedi.
basically, or like, the Star Wars movies, the DC Comics movies that everybody hates. That's why that happens.
It's chaos. It's chaos. Truly. It's chaos.
It's just a complete lack of, it's a lack of order. Because it's like, oh, let's not pick a direction. Let's all just randomly alternate between many directions simultaneously.
I think
but that's the reality of of a big organization like that. Because like if everybody could get what they wanted, what do? Do they make one movie or even one cut to make it a little bit easier? One cut that's like a fan service cut. Then do they make a cut that focuses on
Zack
like
Snyder cut
representation of? Yeah, I mean you'd have all of these different things. It wouldn't be tenable. Which one do you go see? How do you release them? Do you put out like 9 versions on the same day? How much does that cost? Like there's kind of no other way to do it. So they're trapped in this system that's bonkers, like Kevin said. That's like a stew of people churning their ideas for no good reason. At the same time, what do? Make 11 versions? Oh, it's a tough spot.
Tricky trade-off.
Back to
those are the trade-offs, yeah.
For the big picture idea, the concept of this in general, which is like the complexity that comes with numbers, I guess, at a certain scale. And too much information and all these things that's related to what you're saying. I think this is something like, again, that me and Sam talk about, but I think one answer to that, to answer your question, is to put it like in the most simple terms, is something like you have to take control, you have to accept it all as one and like take control of yourself absolutely. View yourself as everything and take control of yourself, if that makes sense. That's probably the best way I can put it, right? In other words,
how far does
those who are like
go?
Focused on consciousness are basically trying to answer that question. Right?
I think you need to elaborate a little bit more.
That's why you're here. Please help me elaborate, because words start to fail me when it comes to talking about this kind of stuff.
Okay, wait. So are we still talking about like this? Like when you have a big corporation, and then there's like this chaos in terms of lack of direction and stuff like that.
I'm talking about the idea before that, where it's just how in general, like with a massive city like LA, the layers of, or like YouTube, massive site like YouTube, the layers of complexity become so much that it's difficult to have any kind of order, basically, is what I'm saying. So there's a lot of chaos. And I'm saying that this kind of stuff is I think it's happening a lot online. It's happening a lot in real life. There's a lot of this in the world right now. So maybe I didn't make that actually that connection clear. But in response to that, a lot of people have chosen to kind of go inside. They've chosen to look inward to
I see.
Because when you look inward, you control yourself. And if you view yourself as part of everything, which is like the idea behind meditation, the idea behind a lot of this new age, like spiritualism stuff, or whether you want to call it new age or not, a lot of it's not new age. Like Buddhism is this idea as well, that a part of one, inside of one is everything, and everything is one. Going back to what you said, Tabor, about the individual at one small scale, is the most local form of being able to manage something, versus the larger scale you go, the harder it is to manage these complicated things, basically.
There's the actual term is the knowledge problem, but it applies to what you're just saying, where it's really nice to work with yourself because your knowledge is 100%, and like even the things you tend not to know, that you don't know them, and that's a huge asset. But I've worked with Kevin for a long time. What percentage do I know him compared to the 100% that's me? I don't know. It's probably pretty high, but it's not 100%. I know me better than I know him. I've talked to both of you guys for a couple years now. It's not 0%. It's not 100%. Where is it? And that's the 4 people on this call. Each kind of step you go, the amount of knowledge you have about what somebody even wants, let alone what they think on a deeper level, it gets lower and lower.
Contracts,
and
yeah.
if you pull somebody, it contracts. Yeah, it's like to a like a limit of 0 kind of thing, where if I pull somebody off the street in Los Angeles who I've never met before, they're incredibly close to 0. They're probably not quite there. Like, I probably know they don't want me to murder them, that they want to stay alive today. I can assume that.
It's ridiculous.
So I know one thing about them. Yeah, well, maybe honestly, there's a non-zero chance that they're hoping that I stab them. That it's
right.
like, God, I just want somebody to end this today. So even that
Especially
one
that
thing
guy.
that seems completely obvious, even that isn't a guarantee. And so the larger a thing
more
gets, the more
uncertainty.
people who are in it. Yeah, it's tough, and it's really appealing to know that I can have a pretty close to 100% handle on this little universe that is me.
Inside of me,
and-
yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a nice thing.
You're exactly picking up you said it better than I could. Oh my God. This is why Tabor's the best narrator there is. He just, I put out like garbage information that's disconnected. And then it's like making up like those pasta making machines where you put in the pasta dough and it comes out all silky smooth. That's kind of what Tabor is. He's like the pasta making machine of conversation.
Thought spaghetti.
Yeah, that's a Hayek. That's a Hayek thing, really. Though, is like he was talking about it in economic terms, where it's really just what you said. The closer you get to 1, the more knowledge you have about how to fix a problem, how to respond, how to allocate resource, whatever it is, you're at 1. So that's an old concept, but I think you're right that people seem to be into it a lot more. Like 20 years ago, I think if Jordan Peterson had come out and said clean your room, it wouldn't have done as well as it did more recently. And
I can confirm that.
What about 75 years ago? You know what I'd say if I was a parent in like 1952 and somebody's telling me to clean, or telling my kid to clean their room? I'd be like, no, don't clean the room, clean the house, clean the garage. We're a family unit. Your room is just a small part of this thing.
Yeah.
Well, 75 years
point.
later, now like clean your room is a very specific thing that resonates because people are trending toward this individual.
Right.
Yes.
But at the
Sam.
same time, I also feel like it's in many ways culturally the opposite. It seems like we are socially, at least in terms of like progressive people, we're like moving towards I guess that in a way you could say that is almost the same thing, but it's like we're moving towards collectivization, right? But then in that sense, the collective is the one. So it goes back to where we were with. It's not the room, it's the house again.
We're hitting a strange, it's very hard to make sense of the world we're heading into because so much of it is in shadows. So much of it is either not seen in terms of like, we don't all have tabs on every form of social media and every type of sentiment that's popular amongst them. And no one could possibly manage to know that. So it's just like, things become more fragmented through the internet is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where this leaning towards the individual comes. I think this is maybe controversially, I would tie this to the advent of pronouns and the advent of new genders, because it's like people want to feel like they're individuals. And if they choose to identify as a certain gender or sexuality in some cases, then that makes that's something they can identify with.
But doesn't that make them part of a group as well?
It does. And that's because people also want to belong. They want to belong in a community and like-minded people, but they also want to be an individual in that group. I think that's kind of the way I would put it. It's like, you know, in a family, you're a part of a family, but you're also you're also your own person. And there's a balance there that's like some ideal spot in between.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about in a lot of ways reminds me of like punk, like early 80s punk, where it's disestablishment, or it's anti-establishment. You know, I'm not part of the system, man. But it's like, meanwhile, the punk aesthetic is everybody dresses almost identically. You know, we have like the leather jacket with the studs and the patches of like the same 7 bands and like, you know, the mohawk or whatever. It's like, okay, on one hand, they're saying, I'm not a part of what you're selling me. And on the other hand, they're saying, but we're all in this together, kind of. And we're all going to kind of dress the same and look the same and think the same, like the same music, and rebel together almost. So it's like this coalition of rebellion rather than true rebellion, which would be lonely. Anarchy. And no one does that. No one wants to be the Unabomber, okay? That's true rebellion. It's like living alone in a tiny shack in the middle of nowhere, mailing bombs around the country, okay? Nobody wants to be like that.
Being lonely is glamorous from an outsider's perspective, but as the lonely person, it's not. I don't think it's very fun.
Not a lot of fun.
You know, it's a lot of work that people don't realize. This came up on, I forget who we were talking to, and it may have been a recording where it was just Kevin and I talking. But at a certain point, you know, like 10 years ago, I was going from country to country. And it became exhausting to meet a new group of people, because you have to meet them on a basic level where it's like, you know, this is what I do. This is where I'm from, whatever. Like, you don't have to do that very often now with your friend circle. They already know this. And so you go on to like, you know, next level conversations. But, you know, when you go to different places, you have to start the whole thing over again. And the more of a loner type you are, the more you're doing these like surface level opening interactions, like playing the demo of a game before you actually get to play it. And all you're doing is playing the demos, and it gets really fatiguing and it sucks. And I think some of the rebellish loner type people, you know, they hate that process. Like, well, I'm going to pull back even further. And then you do wake up one day and you're shipping a nail bomb from a cabin.
And I know what I'm going to title this episode. A conversation about conversations about conversations.
Algorithm gold.
Conversations squared. Just for Kevin.
What you were saying there also just reminds me of like why people like in for example the punk thing. Why it's like, instead of being like you stand as an individual, you stand as in like an alternative system or something. Like what you were saying about the like doing the surface level interactions reminds me of like someone who is like, I don't know, gay or something, right? They have to come out of the closet repeatedly every time they meet someone new, because unless they have like a pride flag on, or they like act really flamboyant or something, in which case they don't have to bother, because it's like, oh well, I'm aligned with this, you could just know already, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're telegraphing it somehow. Sure,
exactly. Yeah. So it's like, maybe
hey Kevin, how does this stuff square with the friend limit? Like, how does the group stuff and the individual stuff square with Robin? What's his last name?
Dunbar.
Yeah,
Dunbar,
Robin Williams. That's right.
Famous anthropologist.
I said thick.
So me.
Thick. Yeah. I said Williams. I said thick.
Dunbar's
number?
I don't know. Yeah, Dunbar's number. I don't know how it squares exactly.
His idea was that there's about 100 people you can have a living memory of in your head, like 100 people you can actively keep track of at any time in your head as a human being. I think that's the idea behind it.
Yeah, essentially, you can have a friendship with, like, you know enough about them and care enough about them, and conversely, they know enough about you and care enough about you. It's not like some stan relationship where someone knows literally everything about some K-pop star and the K-pop star doesn't know they exist. That's not a friend. It has to be reciprocal. And it's a cognitive limit, supposedly. It's just a hypothesis that, we evolved essentially to hold more or less around 150. But I read something, a study this year, I think, came out suggesting it's actually much lower than 150, which I would believe. I actually do believe. But then you have these concentric circles where, your inner circle would be, your nuclear family, and then your closest friends. And it goes out and out and out and out and out until it's just like the guy that you worked with at a pizza shop when you were 18. Like, you know who he is, he knows who you are, but, he's not going to pick you up from the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I think less than friendship, a lot of what we're talking about is just identity and the interplay between how people see themselves individually and how they want people to see them, what signifiers that they are putting out into the world that people can recognize and understand, who they are. And that even comes down to things like your clothes. Definitely your clothes. But what I mean to say is, like, am I wearing an anime shirt because I like this anime? Yes. Do I also want other people who know this anime to know, like, hey, I also like this anime, or whatever it is? Yes. This band t-shirts, there's a relationship there. It's not just, hey, I really love this band. It's like, I really love this band, but I also want other people who know the band. I mean, there are plenty of times where, like, I wear a lot of band hats. I like to wear band hats. I'm wearing an Archspire hat right now. But I'll be walking around the airport, for instance, and somebody would be like, hey man, Archspire or Meshuggah or whatever, and give me like a thumbs up. That's cool. Like, that's not consciously why I'm telling myself I'm wearing the hat, but it's subconsciously 100% part of the deal. And whether people are admitting that to themselves or not is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, like I'm wearing right now an Evo shirt, which means I like to sexually harass women.
And you want people to know that, yeah.
That's not good.
No, it's not good.
And then women see you at the airport and they're like, ah!
That's what the Evo shirt invokes
just call
these
security,
days, unfortunately. But no, but I know exactly what you mean. My wardrobe is full of either references.
Look behind you. There's 2 albums.
Yeah, just have you seen my room?
Pokemon.
Have you seen my room? Like, this is the same thing. I think there's a lot of identity to be found in art that you really enjoy and connect with. That's definitely something I'm a strong believer or advocate of, or whatever, because I feel that way, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
It's tough, though. It's tough because you can use all these things to signal something about you, whether it's as simple as I like this band, or, Sam, you brought up something like a pride flag that's signaling a significant part of somebody's identity. How many of those things can you do? Like, if you saw somebody with, well, you used to see, you talk about.
What?
Does anyone hear that?
Is that me?
I do.
It sounded like an airplane taking off.
I think it's gone now.
It's gone now. Sorry, continue.
Okay. Well, talking about the punk wardrobe, like, you remember seeing the punks with like 70 buttons on their jackets.
Yeah.
And they, like, their jacket was completely filled with buttons. Well, like, how many things can you signal at one time and still, number one, do it in a meaningful way, but number two, have anything left of who you are? Where at a certain point you're this collection of, attributes or interests or ideologies or whatever. And is that you? Are you really truly the list of those things? Probably not. So I think there's a balance between Kevin wears a hat that shows he likes a band, and I have 91 bumper stickers on my car. One is a lot more individual than the other. The one with the laundry list of stuff is like kind of ceased to be an individual in a weird way.
I almost feel like there's like an element of like when you were describing like the punk with like 90 buttons and stuff like that, it just makes me think of like people are trying to like materialize their identity into, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm a collection of things, but like anyone who's like investigated themselves in an introspective way in any at all, like will quickly realize that like who they are is like much deeper than even who they thought they were. You know what I mean? And so it's like that's just, you can't put that in material form.
This is why I have no tattoos, by the way. This exact problem is why I do not have tattoos.
I like
because
the way you think.
I know this about myself. I could never decide on a tattoo that I could confidently say, you know what, 8 years from now, this is still going to be something I want to look at. I can't do it. I haven't been able to do it. Maybe someday. It hasn't happened yet.
I think if you get something that you don't like now, you could probably rely on the fact that you won't like it in 8 years either. So that's the strap.
Oh, you just trick yourself.
Something you just hate right off the bat.
Yeah. I still hate this. Good job, me.
I don't know. I hated shrimp and crab legs when I was like 12, but then tastes change as you get older, and now I would I would do anything for some all-you-can-eat buffet of crab legs right now. So I don't know. I hated those things back in the day. Like everybody right here, right now, has hated somebody before they liked them.
Yep.
Maybe it was a friend in school. Maybe it was a guy or a girl you were interested in. Like, it could be anything. You definitely hated something before you absolutely loved it.
It's
I trust nothing.
Right?
I'm with Kevin on this. That like I don't think there's really much of anything that I'm going to be committed to.
I mean, I would go
Kenny Rogers.
so far to say that like you are only going to be who you are
closest.
in this moment right now, and like for now, this one moment, and then like after this moment, you're something else completely. And you'll never be the same again.
One of the greatest insights, I think, of like learning to live in the present is that everything is changing all the time.
Yeah.
And you can feel it if you like understand
It's
that
terrible.
too.
I mean, you could feel
Everything
it within
is
your
always
own
changing.
body. Like you could just feel like
Yeah.
sensations change like from day to day. Like, you know what I mean? From moment to moment.
Yeah, that's what
I have a
diarrhea
question.
is.
That's a cultural
That couldn't have been
diarrhea.
more
Is really
perfect.
what this is.
That could not have been more perfect. That really could not have been better. Wow.
If each of you guys made a list, though, of things about you, so like, let's say my list is 3 things long. I'm a male. I live in the United States. Like, I'd only get a couple things
ASL.
in. How long would ASL? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's like as surface level as you can get is the decades old ASL.
Yeah.
But how long would that list have to be before you thought somebody who doesn't know me and runs down this list is going to have a very good sense of who I am? How many things, and this is a real question that I'd love a quantitative answer to, how many things have to be on this list before you'd feel like you were accurately represented?
I think I could do it in like 5 probably if I thought really hard about it.
You think that few?
5?
Somebody would
Yeah.
know you?
Yeah, I think that if
5 pages?
No. I think that if I captured like the essence of who I am now or whatever, I could probably boil that down to just a few characteristics that are like typically if you run those characteristics through a given situation, it'll align similarly to how I would.
But if you're wanted for murder, the cops are not finding you based off of five descriptors.
That's true, but you're saying understand
that's how I
me,
would think
not
of it.
know my location. Like,
what's that
What would
do
those
to
5
something
things be?
that's 9th on the list then? Yeah, do you know what they are?
I'd have to think about it. I don't know, but like I'd probably put one of those things would be creative, I would say. I feel like that encapsulates a large chunk of like how I spend my time in different directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I like music and videos and all this stuff that I make. So like creative captures all of that. And like, do I really need to specify like I like making music, I like making videos? Probably not, right? You probably get an understanding of that just from creative.
I mean, you could do, but anything is on that spectrum. Like, even if you said, I make videos, well, do you make videos about math paradoxes, or do you make videos on OnlyFans? These are two radically different
Right, but that's
things.
where one of the other characteristics would probably come in, where it's like, I don't know, maybe it would say like philosophical. So it's like, okay, this person does creative things that pertain to being philosophical. So I'm probably not doing videos.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you know,
That
like,
kind of narrows it down quite a bit, actually. Just that those.
like
two
the
in
idea
combination.
is like with the right few qualities, you can imagine how a conversation with me would generally play out, right?
You might be
Do you think it
thinking
would be
more
valid?
conceptually than I think. Tabor is thinking of a list of items almost. Not exactly, but like.
Oh, maybe I
a list of
misunderstood the question.
A list of interests. I am almost is what I felt like you were talking about.
I think it's all fair game. I think it's all completely fair game. It could be something like physical and quantitative, like your height. You know, that's a well-defined thing that's not up for interpretation. It could be something conceptual, like I am a creative person.
It depends on what you value, doesn't it? What that list.
Yeah.
Because some people might just be very descriptive about it, and they maybe aren't set on any values, or they're unsure about values, so they want to stick to the safest possible things. Whereas, like,
But here's a wrench. What if you're a jerk and everyone thinks you are a jerk, but you don't believe that you're a jerk? You know,
Might
like
even
psychopaths
answer
and sociopaths are like this. They have no ability to understand how they're being perceived by others, but that descriptor is almost more valuable than what the psychopath's going to tell you about themselves.
Right. In that case, you would have to have a large list of things so that people could like infer it. Like, oh, this guy thinks he's always right. That's like a red flag or something. You know what I mean?
You know what I'd love to see? I would love to see something like a dating site based on this concept.
This is
where you get to list
exactly what I was
5
thinking.
things and put a picture up. You know, like just one picture that's a headshot, and we're not talking a good one. We're talking like passport photo level, driver's license photo, where it's like, here's the bare bones face of a person, whatever, and here are 5 words, and that is it. That is all you get to know. Maybe you get to know the distance or something so that you're not wasting your time talking to somebody in Estonia when you're not going to be able to see them. But yeah, like, how would that play out? Would it be a complete disaster? Would more people than I'm thinking be able to match in a meaningful way based on 5 words? I don't know. I'd love to see, I'd love to like play Puppet Master with like 10 million people's romance lives, romantic
can we
lives
make this
to
a joint
see how it would
venture
work.
business idea? Because I think this is the next like $1 billion app.
Well, you know, when you asked the question, like what came to my head was a Tinder profile, and I was like, okay, well, like, how do
it's
I
pretty
word?
close, isn't it?
Because the Tinder profile is like pretty. You can't make it long, like too long, and in general, I think that like they're more effective when they're short and quick to look at. So I was thinking to myself, like, okay, how could I put down myself in a few words that anyone who matches with me?
Sam
or
is
like,
thinking of how he can make his Tinder profile better.
because it's like how would the person who sees my profile like know that I'm the kind of person they want to connect with, and I'm signaling to them like I'm this kind of person and I want you to connect
Just
with me.
hold
'cause I'm
up
this kind
the
of
silver
person.
play button when you
Yeah,
get it.
just do the Oki. But yeah, that's how I was thinking of it. That's where how I got to like, oh, it would be like five words, because it's like if I say I'm like creative, philosophical,
You
and
should
whatever
try that
other
and report
3.
back. I want you to try it and report back.
I believe my current Tinder profile says, I think fortune cookies are. I secretly think fortune cookies are really deep. That's what it says.
I kind of agree with you.
That signals a few things. But yeah, it was crazy when you said 5 because I'm thinking this list would have to be massive. Like I'd want like 500 slots on my list to fill in before I was comfortable with the conclusions that somebody was going to draw from that list. And I totally understand what you're saying, where you think that you can distill it down to 5, and that may very well be valid. But I'm just really like stunned at the difference in what we're thinking.
I have to say, I think I fall closer to Sam's way of thinking. Not even necessarily because having less is better on the surface, but like there's something to keeping things can be more impactful when they're short. Like brevity is the soul of wit, like that quote. And just like there's a certain impact you can make with simplicity that I think when there's so much description, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. It becomes too complicated. Like we were talking about before. Even people as individuals can be too complicated. Another thing Peterson says,
why aren't your videos 12 seconds long? If we don't need anything,
I don't mean like that.
If we don't need to do the complexity, then why is it even a full sentence when you could just make a video that's 5 words?
No. Okay, let me distill what I'm saying better.
Challenge accepted.
When you
Golf.
People are very complicated.
Hair.
When you try to categorize that into too many different ways, it becomes harder to understand than simplifying it.
Yeah, but I think there are like distinctly 2 conversations happening right now. One is like, how do I want other people to feel about me or to understand me? And one is, if police are looking for me, how are they going to find me in Los Angeles? Yeah. Right? They're not going to be like, oh, creative, philosophical, loves food. Definitely Sam. Bring him in. Get the handcuffs. Like that would never happen. He's right there. Get him.
What gave it away? Was it my creativity?
Oh, damn.
That guy looks really creative.
I knew it. I was going to boil it down. The fact that I'm
Holy
creative.
shit, that guy's video was so good. Arrest him.
But on the flip side, if there was a dating profile with 500 attributes, I would be so intimidated that I'd never read it.
Yeah. I would be like,
sure, right.
That makes sense.
Again, I think that's the other way of thinking about the question. I don't think they're the same at all. I think they're 2 different.
Right.
2 different.
Now, what if you're trying to
questions.
get the police to find you on a dating profile?
Oh.
You want the police
what kind
to
of
date
list do you
you
make then? That might be the best list of all because it'd be like, that'd be enticing to people, I think.
I think you would write like, I'm a thief because I'm going to steal your heart or some shit. I don't know.
There you go. Oh, there you go.
It's perfect. Fall for that instantly.
Beautiful. Try that one.
I got to hop off soon, but before we do, real quick, I wanted to mention something earlier about the Create Unknown, which is, the podcast that Matt and I do. That we haven't really talked about on that podcast, so I would love to talk about it here on your podcast, which is the fact that we talk to creators with, a combined X billion number of views. I mean, you're talking people who are wildly successful, like absurdly successful, the best at what they do. They are beloved, around the world, and there is almost no fanfare or almost interest ever in talking to them from anyone. Like, we do that because I am interested in Marquez Brownlee's process. Like, I am interested in, what Physics Girl thinks of, like, educational content today as opposed to 5 years ago. I feel like I'm on a very short list of people who, like, A, are interested and B, are willing to record these conversations or put them out there for other people to look into. But it blows my mind the lack of press that there is around YouTubers or, like, any sort of, like,
Why do
you guys feel that or no? Am I
I
alone?
think about it like before, but now that you mention it, definitely.
Nobody talks
I
about any of
weird
these
that-
people, and they're doing
I'm
amazing
trying to make
things.
sense of. I'm trying to make sense of the
Do you
reasons
think
for it.
it's maybe like because unlike traditional celebrities, like influencers are a little bit more like a dime a dozen, I guess, because it's so accessible and there's like so many. The barrier to entry becoming an celebrity, whatever that means, is like lower, and so many people having their 15 minutes and stuff like that. Do you think that like, or maybe it's just because it's such a new territory that we haven't caught up there, but I don't know.
I think there's a weird contrast.
It's something like oversaturation as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a ton of it. But there are a lot of people with a lot of different interests. But the thing that's weird to me is, like, even a creator's own audience is overwhelmingly not interested in what that creator thinks. You know, and like, so we see people, they'll take an interview we do with them, and yeah, it's not as popular as their videos. We don't expect it to be. We don't think, you know, a million people are going to tune in for a thing. But at the same time, if you're subscribed to a channel, and you have been for years, you'd think a significant portion of people in that community would be interested in a deep dive of that person. And the truth is, they just aren't. You do get that in a couple ways, think of the Dream SMP guys. Like, there are literally things trending on Twitter that's like, this guy farted. And it'll have like 38,000 tweets about it. And then there will be something like Jake Roper of VSauce 3, who has done this show that's so fantastic that he wins an Emmy for it, which is weird for YouTube, for a YouTuber to jump there. He will do, you know, these explanation streams where he goes like hardcore deep into a thing, like one of the episodes. He'll talk to people like us and give more detail and totally open up on this. And what percentage of that audience is interested in that next level? And it's a really low percentage. So I find it weird, you know, what Kevin's talking about, that exists. I find it weird that it exists within people's communities too.
I think just on the surface, I know there's more to it than this, but I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I see it with my own channel even, obviously. But I think a lot of it is, it's two factors. One is people treat YouTube with a lot of brevity. As in, I think a lot of people, they get little bites of content from YouTube. And I think the demographic that treats it that way is increasing. That's the other part to this. That it's a lot of younger people. You know, I don't mean to sound like a boomer, but genuinely, I think younger people do tend to have shorter attention spans, and they do tend to want more sort of bite-sized content. There's obviously exceptions to that, but when you have these massive audiences, it's just a reality that a lot of them are going to just be really this is why I always think sub counts are heavily inflated and almost, they represent very little of an actually engaged audience. They're more like just a number of like interest almost. Of like, oh, this many people are interested in your channel enough to click the subscribe button. But they're not necessarily like committed viewers or people who are even interested in the person they're subscribing to. They might have just liked a video. And a lot of the people who are just engaging with YouTube in a more surface level way, I think prefer content that's just quick, easy, bite-sized, you know, they can watch it when they're eating or something. I mean, that's like, there's entire subreddits dedicated to like mealtime videos, you know.
Right.
That's what I mean.
It's like the
which is obviously everybody does
check off a box of like, oh, I want this one specific thing, and this person's job for me is to fulfill that, and that's it.
But the way I engage with YouTube, and maybe hopefully an increasing number of people will do it this way, it's my entertainment for almost all my information. Like, I don't watch TV, I don't watch movies. I put on a YouTube video, sometimes I'll watch it, sometimes I'll have it on in the background. It could be an hour-long podcast, or it could be a 10-minute, 15-minute video or a cooking video. Like, it's just my little like entertainment throughout the day. I don't know how many people treat it that way, but I feel like when you treat it that way, it's easier to, like you said, dive deep into certain creators and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, do you think that's on the rise, or do you think the number of people who are interested in this stuff is going up, staying the same, or getting lower? Because it's like it's always been this way. With TV in 1985, there were the people who watched a show occasionally, there were people who watched it every week, and then there were people who were pumped to see like what was in the tabloid magazines and the grocery store checkout to hyper follow the actor or actress that they were into. You know, those are the kind of the super fans we're talking about who will go deep with somebody. But do you think is the rate of that changing?
I think it's getting diluted, meaning like there are so many people for you to be a hyper fan of now that the numbers game like squishes that original amount of people and disseminates it across like a huge swath of people, so that, I mean, we were talking about this I think with Kyle Hill, where he was talking about like why SpongeBob memes are so popular. And
yeah, that was him,
I thought like, well, SpongeBob memes, a couple of reasons. One is that there are so many episodes of SpongeBob and so many funny situations that almost anything you can think of probably has like 10 amazing screenshots. But the other thing is like SpongeBob, Harry Potter, like those were like the death rattle of media that everybody knew, right? That was it. That was like, especially like Harry Potter. I feel like that was like the death rattle of like everybody saw Harry Potter and they knew about it. And now, is there anything like that? I mean, there are so many shows, and there's so many YouTubers, and there's so many TikTokers, and there's so many Instagram people, and there's so many sports you could watch. I mean, whatever you're interested, so many musicians, like everybody's going to find who they're obsessed with. But what in the world is everybody, aside, I suppose, from like MCU, what's bringing people together that like everyone can agree, like, yes, we all saw that Spider-Man movie? It's just, even that I don't think is nearly what it was back then.
Those are the most cringe things anyways, because they're always appealing to the lowest common denominator. Anything that's like that is able to do that has to appeal to a lower and lower common denominator of like, great example is like Rick and Morty or something, where a lot of people who don't like the show would point to the fact that as the show has gone on, it's just started being self-referential and like going for those easy, like, reference, I understand, clapping like a seal type moments, you know? And it's like, so, but that's like, as a consequence of everything being so spread out, I think that's what you have to do to appeal to a wider audience, like simplify the appeal almost. But I think that's also just part of what we were saying earlier, where things are kind of atomizing more. People are becoming more just their own little trajectory of interests, you know, whether it's like the music they listen to or the videos they watch or the influencers they follow, everyone's becoming more in their own little world, their own little bubble, rather than being this big.
But see, what Matt brought up earlier about like even within a YouTuber, for example's own community, there's like a lack of interest, right? So like, even though there isn't like other than Marvel, there's no like unifying cultural like media phenomenon or whatever. Like even in the niches, it's also like that, or at least it seems to be that way with influencers and online entertainment. What
do you mean? Like, oh, like it's even split up amongst at a smaller level.
Even
too.
when you split it up, it's you still have that same sort of disinterest and apathy going on for like anything beyond like the very specific role that the media plays. So yeah, I actually never thought about that before too much, but like I have no answer, but I find it incredibly intriguing as well.
It's challenging for people like us, frankly, to navigate through that, you know, without. You could see why a lot of people take the easy way and like definitely do appeal to something that's maybe beneath what they're actually interested in, but because it's a unifying enough, you know, foundation, they stick with it. You know,
it's probably part of why so many people don't want to go on podcasts, right? Is because they just want to fulfill their role, and any deviation from that comes at the potential cost of like a compromise that they don't want to take, right? Unless like what you're known for is like your thoughts on everything. When you know,
you're definitely like right on the money with certain creators who I've talked to who will not come on the Create Unknown because they don't want to lift the veil. Like they say, you know, what I do is what I do, and that's all that I do, and I'm not like removing the mask to go on your podcast.
Yeah,
it's
they
not
don't
worth
want
it to me.
People to see a different face because that might come at the cost of their
the man
main
behind
face.
the curtain. Yeah, like let's stick with the Oz, the big green Oz.
Oh man,
Exactly.
Not the dork behind the curtain.
I'm sorry to be annoying with this, but that's literally a scene in my video that I'm editing. So I swear I'm not making this up, but yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah,
though.
well,
it's like
our spy cameras are working. That's all I know.
Yeah.
they are.
One's
Yeah.
in your brain.
Not to be. I do want to say, though, I think on some sort of spiritual level, we all are connected, though, through consciousness. That's
I agree with
something that I think is like the hope in the darkness with all of this, is that we still all are connected in a way.
At the very least, we're all making up the universe right now. So
Yeah, that's another way to view it.
Well, that's why half of the things we've talked about are in your video already.
Exactly.
Same
Exactly.
reason. I got to work on my video, though, guys, so I'm going to take off. Please continue to have remarkable conversation with Matt, as always. But thank you so much for having me on. I have a YouTube video to work on, of all things.
Weirdo. Who does that?
and you're spending your time talking about stuff that
Disgusting.
your audience doesn't care about.
Oh my
I
God,
know.
It comes full circle.
A masochist.
No, we're going to make him
All right.
care this time. All right.
All right, take care, guys.
dude.
Thank you.
Later. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, we need help because
Yeah.
it's not VidCon anymore. So we need a new name for it that's going to be catchy and descriptive.
Oh, I think you gotta call it Gush-con.
That's what I
Gush-con?
said.
Gush-con.
Gush-con.
Okay, well that's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you were
now-
just listening in earlier, but I think it's Destiny. I don't know. That you
We
said
need to
that.
rent.
It flows. It sounds like a thing. It's like Gush-con sounds like a real thing.
It
you know?
flows.
And
It
it's
does
tough to
flow.
find. Yeah, yeah, and
Flows
it
like
sounds
consciousness.
interesting too. You know. Yeah, yeah. It's not. There's nothing negative about it. It's like, oh, that sounds like a thing, and it sounds like it's worth hearing more about. I like Gush-con.
Are you coming to Gush-con?
So Kevin was a featured creator at VidCon, and that comes with, like you actually figure out the arrangements and stuff like that because you are on doing some things as part of VidCon, whatever. So we were set to do it that way, which meant I don't have any arrangements because they were going to be done through VidCon. So I have to figure that out. I have to figure out whether I should do that because the time is fine. Like that's blocked off anyway. That's not the issue. But like you got to fly. You got to stay. This adds up.
I have an idea, and maybe we can talk about. Well, we could just talk about this now and cut
Let's
it if we
just
want
do
to.
it. Yeah.
So I've had this idea floating around, but I don't. What I'm missing is somebody who's like a good organizer, because that's not me. Somebody who's good at planning, not really me. But the idea is to get some sort of communal space that we either rent out
Yep.
or can just kind of have to ourselves in some way in that general area that, it's not going to be a convention center, but something where we can just kind of hang out and gather maybe even just for a night, maybe not even like all day or anything. And just making that like the official, like one thing that we all show up to or something,
How many people do you think it's going to be?
That's a good question.
Okay, well,
Because
we know
I think
our
that's
house
that's
is
honestly where it begins.
Okay,
seems
let's
like-
see who you
How many
know.
is that, then?
Let's
Yeah,
see who you know. Let's see who we know.
because we got like 6 people, including us.
But we also know more people
I
who are
bet
going.
you could get. Yeah. I mean, and as it gets closer to, like those numbers will settle out both ways.
Right.
But I bet you could get a solid block of like 25 plus.
Right.
And that's significant. You know, that's a tight group. That's hard. Yeah, but it's enough. You know, it's even like 10 people is a group, 25 is beyond a group.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
So I bet you could do that. And then, you know, you're looking at, you can grab a small bar that, you know, wouldn't do like tremendous. Well, look, I mean, if I have a small bar and I say, we're going to have 25 people who are buying drinks all night, like that's very well maybe better than what I expected.
Exactly.
You know, to have.
So
anyway.
we just have to really, all I'd have to do then, it sounds like, is, or I don't know if you're interested in helping set this up or facilitate this, but if you are, it's definitely something I'm interested in. I guess it's like as simple as like, you're right. Like if it's a good deal for the owner of the establishment, then they're going to.
What he's trying to say is we need you to plan this for us. Because we're not capable.
You really just like look at a map and start making calls, because some people are like, no, I don't do that. Like they just plain do not do it for all sorts of reasons. Like some of them don't have the staff to deal with certain situations, you know, so like there might be a blanket reason that they say no, and then others do it all the time and whatever, and it's never something that's like listed on a website. So I think it's one of those things where like you look at a map relative to where the house is and like do a radius and just start making phone calls, 99% of which are going to go nowhere. But think of how many people though, like if you really spent a week thinking of like everybody you end up talking to like as being on that list, you've got a bunch. You got a bunch already. You could probably get more. And I think right now it's this like super nebulous, like everybody's going to hang out for a while. Yeah, but I mean, as soon as there's something specific, then even if it's, you know, a certain day, then I think, well, there's something to make a decision on, right?
I think we should do the bar.
Look at that specific thing and think.
Yeah, because you're filling the void,
feasible.
right? So if you fill that VidCon void with something, then you're gonna attract people, especially if there's like, oh well, now a bunch of like the YouTuber people.
That's what I'm saying. We should do it because it makes it semi-official, even if it's just a bar. It's like, no, there's this plan. There's a concrete plan, and here it is. It's open. Or it's whatever, open to the extent that it's open. Maybe we do, and I don't know how we do it actually, but you know, it makes it more concrete, is what I'm saying.
I do think people are a little bit tentative because of California's, you know, mask rules and stuff like that. Like, of all the places that change this frequently and with some seriousness, it's like California and New York, you know, and like that was something that we factored in. It's like, well, you know, if this were in Nebraska, we'd have a pretty good sense of the pace of any changes. But, you know, like you can wake up and see that some crazy thing has happened in California overnight, or specifically L.A. too. Like, I know Anaheim is different county, but they tend to track with L.A. County. Well, it's tough. I wouldn't feel good about booking plane tickets. You know, I have reservations.
Maybe. I think I thought about that too, to be honest. I don't like a lot of things. Like in California, it's unnecessary. There's no reason for this event to be in California, basically, is the answer.
So many people are just located there, including YouTube's headquarters, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, but YouTube's out of it now. Now TikTok was the sponsor for the first time, and Google and YouTube just had no association this year, and so that changed things.
Wow.
But still, yeah, I mean, I think, that was a big change. Yeah, YouTube is not, you know, they've always been the lead sponsor, really, and this year it's TikTok, and that, you know, has changed the composition of.
So a lot of TikTokers
creators and all of that stuff.
Even though it's canceled, or do you think they're not going to go?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot of people on TikTok. I mean, we do some education stuff.
They're what? Yeah, TikTokers are
probably.
Like 7.
Yeah, if I at 39 started like rifling off TikTok names, one of you should call the police.
Yeah.
That would be unnatural.
Good choice of words, rifling.
Man, I really hope that now you're making me nervous with the amount of people that will actually show up. But
well, we could get 25, I think.
I think we could get 25. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I want to get this
the big
bar
thing is going to be.
What's that?
situation down.
Well,
because it will make people
but
more
what if
sure.
What if there's like an indoor mask mandate, and so like you go to the bar, but
that
you
will
still
be
have
part
to
of the
wear
agreement.
a mask?
No. Hold on.
But if they're
not,
forced to,
no, they're not forced to. I've been to a bar in LA where they didn't make you.
Yeah, but
wear
we were
a
just
mask.
saying how it could change on like a dime, right?
I
We could wake
suppose
up
so,
the day of the event, and then it'll be like, oh, we can't have more than 10 people in a building or some shit. Like, you know what I mean?
that is true.
but at that point, then people are like, oh, let's do a party at somebody's Airbnb. Because like
And then the
25 people
Airbnb
in a house, or
Yeah.
they may get extra. Who knows? I don't know. But I think that's the kind of thing that people are worried about.
That's why I don't like
is like,
California.
is this just gonna?
Well,
yeah. Is it gonna go to a point where like this begins to suck?
hey, worst case scenario, we could move it to Vegas. I could drive us all there. I really could. I actually could.
It's only 6 hours.
No, it's like 4 hours.
There's a luxury shuttle service that is an Armenian company that their business is going between LA and Vegas.
Let's do it.
Greg,
I'm
you
gonna
could
call them.
literally work for them.
I really could.
You may as well. It's like
might
all
as
you
well.
do.
That's all I do. This is facts.
You're just an Armenian.
It's
that
cheap
travels
too.
back and
Like
forth.
it's really inexpensive to take that shuttle, and like I was pumped to do it back in the spring, and then
I
life
actually think
got
this is a
canceled.
brilliant idea.
I'm
This is a
going
really
to
good
Armenia
backup.
September 4th.
And he's taking
Yeah,
a
you
shuttle.
mentioned that the other day.
And I'm taking a shuttle there.
It's just driving the whole way.
It just sends us off to Mars. That's the real Armenia.
Do you have specific plans, or is it a hangout thing? A
my
family thing, or what?
my we're definitely not including this recording, by the way. But my
This is slowly just becoming a regular conversation.
yeah, we should just end the recording. I mean, we're kind of just talking.
It's up to you guys. I'm good with either direction.
I could end it.
I don't
We're just
even
talking.
mind having this in there, to be honest. Like, I think it's
Okay,
kinda
fine.
funny.
We'll cut it later if we want. My dad and brother, it's just a little bit personal information, but we can, it's small. My dad and brother have been in Armenia for like since May. And we actually have a place there in Yerevan, which is the capital city. And they've been having a great time, actually. There are some ongoing like political issues at the border because essentially Azerbaijan is like constantly trying to encroach on Armenia's land, even after they already took like this massive border region this year, which didn't even belong to them. So that's obviously like concerning. But I guess Russia is sort of peacekeeping somewhat, or at least they're like a buffer currently. So hopefully it doesn't.
They seem to be, like keeping the temperature down, even if it's just the prospect of them getting involved. That alone seems to be.
It's
keeping it
interesting
down. But
because
no,
Armenia's
like
biggest ally
said on
is
the border,
essentially
there's, like,
Russia.
daily shit there.
Like they rely on Russia for a lot. Armenia does. But anyways, that's just geopolitics. But before that, wait, I was going to say something else though about what we were actually talking about Gush-con. Yeah, so like we could have a backup. Like realistically, I think the best plan would be to try to plan out for the bar thing, because I think that's pretty low committal actually. Just getting it for a night, filling it with people. I don't think that'll be that hard to organize if I, like you said, call up a few different people. But as a backup, like let's say the situation drastically changes or whatever with their law, their little mandate laws there, then we can definitely like fall back on Vegas. I think we can make that work.
And do you think that we should spike the water with acid or secretly feed everyone peyote?
I think we should. Well, I want to do a DMT session.
Oh, okay, yeah, like a mass DMT session.
Mass DMT, or
we'll become
ayahuasca.
one. We'll become one.
We actually need that. This part we're definitely gonna do. It might be on the trip to Vegas. It might be in the bar. I'm not sure yet, but
might be at YouTube headquarters.
That's where you come in, Tabor. That's where you come in. You're gonna be
so I can be like the supervisor and like designated driver for the whole thing.
You're essentially gonna be the Walter White
monitor.
You're gonna be the Walter White of our little operation.
You're gonna make the DMT, and then what you're gonna dematerialize to
yeah,
so no one can find you.
Okay, I think we have a plan. Listen, guys, I gotta work on my video as well, and I also want to put this plan into action.
I'm not going to let you go before you do this. You have to come up with a sponsor for Gush-con.
Can it be a drug? Or does it have to be a real company?
The sponsor is sponsored by the universe.
Oh.
I was thinking somebody you could embarrass on Twitter. You know, let's just decide it's like
it's
Meta
Oki.
PCs.
Sponsored by Oki?
Oki.
Yeah.
Gush-con, sponsored by Oki. And Kino. Wait, Oki and Kino.
Ooh.
Sponsored by Kino and Oki.
To have his name on it, I feel like.
Sponsored by Kino and Oki.
Gush-con, sponsored by the Kino cast, featuring the Create Unknown. I've never heard a more...
That's the best title I've heard.
Oh my god, we have to do a 3-way podcast when we're in California.
That's when we... That's when we truly ascend. It's just going to be us all. We need to be definitely under some sort of influence of something at the time, though, or else it's going to be way too awkward.
You guys drink, right?
We're going to get drunk.
I do. I don't really go beyond that.
Okay, so we'll just do shots on the.
Okay, we're just going to put LSD in your beer then. Don't worry about it.
Shut up.
Oh, no, we're doing shots. We're doing shots.
We're doing shots. We're doing shots.
Okay, yeah, no, it'll be good. We'll have a good time.
It'll be great.
We're going to be creating a lot of unknowns, that's for sure. You're definitely going to be making something and meaning something. Okay, now that didn't mean anything.
Let me tell you about making shit and meaning shit. That's just going to get insanely drunk. That's right. If we can get up and walk at the end of it, then it'll be a complete failure.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Which is why it'll end with us cutting our legs off.
It's going to be brutal.
And that's when Donovan will come in. And he'll just make fun
Then he rolls in. He rolls in.
Yeah.
And he takes control. He rolls on top of us. Oh my. We're making the greatest comedy special of all time.
Okay.
All right.
Let's end this here.
Yeah.
This is getting way too off.
Stay tuned.